next session is on strategies for monetizing intellectual property. We all know that in today's economy, we have cutthroat competition, and to win customer leads, there's always overlap and gray areas around product features. Very interestingly happens with a lot of big software companies as well. And it has always become, now it's become all the more essential for us to have a strategy to protect and monetize that intellectual property. To lead this session, we have Jatin Trivedi. Jatin Trivedi is a senior member of YJ Trivedi and Company, and he is a practicing advocate who practices in the area of patent and trademarks. And he consults a lot of corporate giants, nationally and internationally, around areas of IP management. With that, I request Jatin.
Thanks, Karanjit. Good afternoon, friends. It's a very challenging job for me. You know, usually I've been, being a practicing lawyer is always good to speak when you're on the other side of the dais. So these are very rare opportunity where I get an opportunity to speak on the dais. So first of all, thanks for attending this session. As Karanjit says that, you know, in these days, the intellectual property has become a very essential for all the SMEs, more specifically into the field of IT. There was some connection when I joined the IP industry somewhere in the year 1998. When I joined, I was a bit frustrated because people were not knowing about the intellectual property, and when I used to introduce myself, they were misinterpreting and they were considering this as an IT rather than the IP, because that was the era where the IT has boomed in the industry, India, and slowly and gradually have migrated to the United States and other part of the world. When I turned around 5 or 6 years of experience in 2005, somewhere we got a lot of amendments and changes took place in India in terms of the intellectual property. Somewhere in the year 2010 and 11, we got appellate tribunals, we got specific juries, judges who deal with the intellectual property. Sometime in the 2016-17 recently, we have been recognized as a search authority by the World Intellectual Property Organization, and in last couple of months, we have the record of the Controller General Office that India has been most preferred the search authority across the globe, beating the European Patent Office as well. So thanks to the IT industry, and it is my pleasure to be within you all. So I will take a couple of more minutes to just introduce you. I'm sure you must be all aware about the intellectual property, so I will not bore you with what the intellectual property is all about. But my only slide says about that you need to realize that, recognize that what is the intellectual property within your organization are. And if you're able to identify those intellectual property, then you need to have to protect the intellectual property well. There are several laws pertaining to that. That is trademark law, copyright law, patent law, and a design act as well. Taking that two into consideration, you need to first identify, if you look into this slide, it deals with the three major things is that you need to realize the intellectual property, you need to protect the intellectual property, and you need to monetize the intellectual property. So my focus point is the monetize, that how best you can encash the intellectual property and how you can make the money out of it. But before I go to the slides, I would just request all of you to have a look into the last slide, which I wanted to refer, is a case of the Rolls-Royce, because why the intellectual property is so important for all of you is a case of the Rolls-Royce, where the Rolls-Royce has been bought over by the Volkswagen at the rate of 780 millions. And these 780 millions were in the part of the contract where the word or the trademark or the brand Rolls-Royce was not mentioned. And later when the BMW entered into the contract with the very negligible amount of 65 million for the brand Rolls-Royce, And still, in my view, and I'm sure you also all we agree with my view, that the intellectual property at the rate of 65 million is still a good deal for the BMW. So friends, we are talking about the we are talking about the intellectual property, property which is part of the organization which we ourselves created. So we create it, we protect it, we manage it, and then we exploit it. That will lead to a competitive advantage into the market. So it gives you a monopoly for the several, under the different act, as I said, the all intellectual property will give you the separate monopolies. So I will not go into the deep into it, but it will give you a right to exploit those intellectual property which you have created and which you have managed and which you have protected it. And thus you will have the added advantage into the competitive world of the IT. So these are the three elements which I believe that to have the best protection of the intellectual property is that you need to, within your organization, you need to have the strategies that, which will also includes that how best your intellectual property future is, what are the competitive products are, and what are the price difference between the competitive product, and if you add this, then there are a commercial impact on the product per se. So these will need to be analyzed by you, and you have to create the strategy for the intellectual property to be shaped in. Once you are done with, and the strong recommendation is to innovate the intellectual property and innovate something which is in need of the market and which is something which gives you an added advantage to your own product. So you innovate it. And lastly, but not the least, but is to execute the rights, right? So when you have the intellectual property, you have to have the system in a place which will take you to the execution and where you will be able to monetize the actual value of the intellectual property. So these calls for the structuring within the organization. So again, it's part of the management, so I will not go deep into it, but yes, this is something which I felt that you need to realize that the strategize, innovate, and execute. So first, at looking to the competition, looking to the market need, looking to the own strength, after analyzing all the three, you need to create the strategy within your organizations. Then you have to innovate on the basis of the requirement of the market, and which brings the added advantage to your product. And obviously, as I said, you need to execute it. So normally we are acquainted with, I'm sorry for the slide which is a little blur, but we are, word capital. So that's something which comes always in the mind of the businessman. But here I just wanted to refer the human capital which we are all familiar with. We have the experience of the team, right? We have the insight and the know-how and the skill of our own team within the house. And we have the creative minds with us. We have the innovations. And we also have the management ability of our own senior team members, right? But if the other end, if you look at we have the programs, we have the inventions, particularly when I'm addressing to the IT industry, right? We have the database, we have the documents, and we have the design as well. Now, the best part of what I wish you to have a look at it is that the intellectual property is something mix of both. If you look into the intellectual assets, which we have the database and the documents and designs and invention and programs, and at this merge with if you blend it with the skill and the know-how and the management ability of our own team, you will be able to bring the innovation in your own R&D center or maybe your lab or maybe your organization. I will just keep because I have a less time, but this I wanted to, this I just wanted to refer to some of the filing, which I will, if time permits, I will come back to this class. Yeah, so there are a couple of myths, right? So that is something which I wanted to tell you here is that there are certain myths that in IT industry, one is that the software per se is not patentable. That is what being said all over the country when the IT industries are approaching to the professional like us. But I tell you that the latest computer-related, so CRI, computer-related inventions, the guidelines has been published by the Controller General, and which refers that even the software also can be patented now under the Patent Act. So obviously it is subject, there are certain conditions, but yes, it's little loosen up, and I tell you that it's last 2.5 years it is in exist, and that has been well recognized, even the world at large also respecting that the policy or the guidelines has been brought out by the Controller General. So that is something India has done so far about the IT industry and protecting the new inventions in terms of the software. There is another myth that, when its matter comes of the competing with the big giants, right? So here is the case which I just wanted to share with you, that it's an IT company which is I4I, which was based in Canada and was having hardly, 30 people team member, and they had a dispute with the Microsoft, which is one of the giant, and I don't need to go into it, but they had a dispute about the word 2007, and not only that they have been restrained, but the US market, besides awarding, they have restrained by the court and also have awarded 290 million as a damage to the I4I from the Microsoft. So this is what I wanted to share with you, is that the two part. One is that you forget that the intellectual property does not protect the software per se, that is by way of the CRI. And the second is that it is a myth that, the small enterprises or maybe the small innovator or maybe the invention which is taken place at the small labs cannot be cannot beat the house of the giants, right? So this is the ideal case. There are a number of cases in terms of the trademark and the copyright, but just since it was connected to the IT industry, I thought I should bring it before you. So this is the case I just referred with you, and I'm sure you all must be aware of. Sorry, I'm just exit. Anyway, so there are other cases, like there are a couple of more cases, like I'm sure many of you are aware of the situation took place at the, though it is a trademark related, but the Pidilite industry has taken over the company called Blue Coat. That is at the rate of 284 crores. And recently I was part of the transaction at the US-based company where one of the hardware company has taken over the US-based, one of my client, US-based and Ahmedabad-based as well. Company has been taken over by one of the hardware manufacturing company at the rate of 780 crores. So obviously, since last 7 to 8 years, I have been managing their intellectual property portfolio, so I'm a bit familiar about that what is the worth has been paid to the intellectual property. Similar way, there is another brand which is called Havemore, which has been sold at the 1,020 crores for the, which is very big name in the ice cream industry, which has been purchased by one of the Korean manufacturer, Lotte. So this is all, and I believe that it's intellectual property, as in terms of the investment. I would suggest that it is a rightly investing property, and I'm sure many of you must be aware that even the Microsoft per se, if you look into the valuation of the Microsoft, there are huge numbers you will see in terms of the intellectual property valuation. So as far as the valuation is concerned, I would recommend that each of you at least should know that what is in your pocket. And if you are aware of that what is in your pocket, so over the period when the PE or the venture capitalist or maybe the competitor wish to buy you or encash through the competitive product to be introduced, that time it will be more added advantage. In terms of the monetization, there are several ways of it. Like, so since I have a couple of more minutes, I will just tell you that, you can license the intellectual property even if you are not able to manufacture those products or to services. And those licensed product can give you a benefit in terms of monetary by way of a royalty, by way of a license fee, and also in some of the cases where you are not competent enough to produce that product, but if you have an idea which calls for the nurturing, you can approach to the people or to the organization who can bring this product into the market, and there also the idea level also can be protected, and then you can develop it in form of a licensed product. So that's where you can mark. Moreover, recently in one of the transaction, when you bring it, nowadays people bring the IPOs, that has become a fashion in the industry, I would say, more particularly in SME. In IPO, you can definitely count this as a value asset, and you can also collaterate this. Bank also accept this as a collateral for the raising the funds in the organization. So intellectual property is worth investing in and best way to monetizing it. Thank you very much. Any question? I've been a little fast because I was just having 20 minutes, so you can still have a 3 minutes. If you want, you can raise a question. I'm open to discuss any point, even beyond this topic which has been given to me. All right, so I believe that, yeah. Oh, there is a, okay, anyway, go ahead. Yeah. Yes, sir. Right, sir. So, even if you are a service company or even if you are a product company, the first foremost is, I keep on telling everybody that what is the best intellectual property everyone has is your own name, right? So, in case of any company, first and foremost, when you are into the service industry, your brand name is more important and is the intellectual property. Second is that if you create a platform or if you create a product which helps you to deliver those services very promptly with the quality essentials, then those process or that product or a platform can be protected as an IP, and you can monetize on the same as well.
Following question, when we have an IP, how bank will valuation will happen, and what is the process? How we can know that this is the valuation of my IP?
All right, there are different process as regards to the valuation of intellectual property. As people look at on the profit base, there are market base. So once you have to get the process done, there are scientific method altogether. Usually people have a concept that profit multiplied by 10 years is my worth of the company, but that's not how the scientific method works. But there are scientific method and there are different modes. So if you work on that, then you will get the particular value of it. And there are valuers. Now I tell you the bank, like I was dealing with the Punjab National Bank, and in Gujarat also there are two valuers who do the valuation work authorized by the Punjab National Bank, and they have taken that as a collateral. And one of my clients have got around 8 crore as a credit against the 4 patents we have given as a collateral. So that is something which is nowadays happening. You had some question? So your question is whether software is patentable or not. Yes, that's what I referred. You know, there are now, before 2.5 years, the situation was a little different, right? It's somewhere in 2017, early 2017, we got a regulation from the Controller General, which is called CRI, which is Computer Related Inventions Guideline for the CRI. If you refer that guideline, that allows the software per se to be patented, but there are certain criterias, like, you know, AI-based software is patented. There are, if you have the database based software, then it is patented. So there are certain software which are patentable. Most of the earlier days, like before 2017 notification, the blanketly the software where controller was rejecting, but later due to the global pressure, we have brought the amendment in 2017, and those guidelines are allowing some of the software to be patented. Yeah. Yes, please. Right, okay. So usually it happens, because if it is a case of a copyright, I would say that it is a little easy. But in case of a patent, I would suggest that in case of out of all 4 intellectual property, patent, design, trademark, and copyright, the patent and design is more essential, that you should keep it in mind that you should not disclose before you reach to the controller's office. Because if you put it on the blog, if you own yourself, published it any place, or market, or export, or expose it to your JV partners even at a point, then and then also it will be considered as a published document. Yeah.
Incident happened with me. One with Facebook, I discussed my idea to Facebook about launching one new feature, right? The new feature is still existing on their platform. That is celebrating friendship, right? You are celebrating 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years friendship with particular person, right? And they launched it after my writing document, after like 10 months later. In that situation, what happened?
So first and foremost, I would say that, you know, whenever you are entering into any kind of discussion, even with the consultant, let me put it very frankly, you should enter into the non-disclosure agreement. If you have done so, then you have an evidence that you have disclosed this particular information to the Facebook, and you should have. If you have, then definitely you have a right to protect yourself, for sure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, so that was an interesting session on how to protect your IP. Thanks, Jatin. So I'll request Jamin Shah from DevIT, who's also the chair for the Domestic Council, to hand over a small memento to Jatin.